What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. And so today we're going to take a look at how you can get started writing for strings using your string sample libraries. And so this is going to be multiple topics basically in one video. We're going to go over how you can take a piano sketch, split it out to the different sections of the string orchestra, and then some MIDI massaging techniques as well to get the most out of them as well to make it sound realistic. And yeah, it's going to be so much fun. And let's just dive right in. So the first thing you want to do is to have your piano sketch, because it's really important to understand where the melody is, where the harmony is, so the chords underneath, and then also the rhythmic aspects as well. So those are kind of the three core elements that make up music, right? Melody, harmony, and rhythm. And so what I want to do is quickly show you this piano sketch, and then we'll get into the actual arranging. So let's have a quick listen here. All right, there we go. So a very simple piece, but you can hear I went for more of a ballad style, something a little more comforting and nostalgic. And yeah, it's very free flowing and it has rubato. So I actually did not use the click at all for this. And so you really don't need the click all the time when you're writing music that is more rubato and more free flowing, right? So anyway, the first thing I'm going to start with is the violins 1, because the melody on top is the most easy thing to lay down. And what I'm going to do is use the Dolce library from Audio Imperia. And so what I'm going to do is record the melody line, and I'm going to ride the mod wheel at the same time, because that will provide the contrast between the different dynamic layers. So let's actually get started here and record the melody here. So I'm going to press R, and we're going to give it pickup. Here we go. Okay, so you know what? I'm actually going to I'm going to mute the piano actually, because now I already have an idea of what the melody is. I don't want the piano to distract me while I'm playing the string line. So here we go. Okay, there we go. So purely the melody, and for this library specifically, it's recommended that you actually use the sustain pedal at all times, unless you're trying to have a break between phrases and you actually want the note to be released, so then you can release the sustain pedal. But for most sample libraries, when you use legato, the main things you want to look out for is that you want to overlap the notes to activate the legato transitions, right? So you can see the MIDI notes are overlapping, and you just want to make sure that if you are doing rebow notes, like if you want to repeat the same note, then some libraries will program in the sustain pedal to activate those rebowing transitions as well. But anyway, let's move on now to the next part, to the basses. And so I usually like to have the top and the bottom laid out first. That kind of is my outline, and that kind of serves two purposes. The first is to give me the actual melodies itself, which is usually on the very top. So that's the actual limit of how high I can go. And then the bottom, the harmony, outlines the exact chords that I know I'm going to use. And so then my job after that is to fill in the inner voices one at a time, right? But the second practical thing is, I kind of already mentioned it, it actually gives me that high and low extreme limit. So I know that my inner parts can't really go beyond the violins 1 or below the double basses, or else that wouldn't really sound great and it would kind of go outside of the comfortable ranges of those instruments. So moving on to the basses, I kind of intended the first half of this piece, this little cue, to be more intimate and emotional and kind of sound a little bit smaller and more comforting. So I'm actually not going to put the double basses in the first half. I'm actually going to start them here in the second half. So then it feels like the piece is expanding and it's getting deeper and stuff. But in the first half, I want it to feel a little lighter, a little more innocent, right? And a little more pure. So we don't need anything super dark and deep there. So I'm going to start here in the second half. All right, nice. Now, while I do this, I'm just going to make sure to balance the tracks as well. So the double basses are a little bit loud for my taste. I'm going to decrease the volume by around 3 decibels there. Let's have a listen. There we go. That's much better. And then here in the middle of this phrase, you can see I'm really trying to swell up. Right, really take advantage of those dynamic layers, because it's not just volume that's being affected, it's the actual intensity of the performers playing harder in their bow and putting more vibrato into the performance. I really want to inject that sort of passion and emotion into this. So this minor 4 chord here, we're in the key of E major. On this A minor chord, it really is that modal mixture, so I want to accentuate that using that passion. Okay, let's move on now. So I could go upwards from low to high, or I could go down. So in this case, let's actually go down, because I already have my melody here, so I can start putting my violins to around a third, a fourth, a fifth below. I can kind of harmonize the violins one. So let's give that a shot. Yeah, let's play something and figure this out. Here we go. Okay, there we go. So in the more intimate spots, I kind of put the violins to a little bit closer to violins one, because I wanted it to feel more intimate and a little bit more closed. But then in the second half, you can see I started going into larger intervals here, mainly like sixths and even sevenths sometimes, or fifths, just because I want that more expansive sound. And we only have 5 parts without divisi, so I want to make sure they're spread out evenly over the course of the spectrum. I have to extend this note a little bit longer. Let's see, I'll hear that one more time. It's a little too long. I think that's about right. Cool. So in terms of the voicing, I think that's okay. In this case, you know what? I already know what harmony I want here in the cellos. I'm not using double basses, but I do know what I want in the cello. So I'm actually going to record the cello line for the first half, and then I might modify the violins too in response to that, because I don't necessarily want any doubled notes in unison, because I want to take advantage of all 4 voices, right? To play different notes to fill out the chord. So let's hear this. All right. So the violins 2 that I played originally here in the first half really is just doubling the cellos like an octave above. So I actually don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out entirely. I want to redo this. So I know I have an E here. You know what? I might do another E, but I might actually go up with the violins 1 to kind of match that. Instead of doing the kind of the bass line that the cellos are doing, which is another option, I might just go up to kind of stick a bit closer to it. So let's give it a shot. In the violins 2, here we go. Okay, so let's figure this out again. Notice here I'm going up with the violins 1 now. And then, yeah, this one should have gone to a B. Right, so now they're separated in thirds, which is a very nice consonant sound when you're in kind of like this major key. You want to kind of use the chord tones of the chord you're playing. And that's the beauty of samples, by the way. You can literally fiddle with every single MIDI note as opposed to a live performance. Okay, here we go. Let me see. I might start that C sharp a bit earlier. A, C sharp. And then here, yeah, that A sharp is already being played in the cellos, so I'll just keep that C sharp there for now. Okay, so now this is what, this is what our three parts look like. Violins 1 on the top, violins 2 right underneath, and then below here are the cellos. So now I need to fill in the violas somewhere right here in between, right? So it will look visually and it will sound balanced as well. Okay, here we go. Let me think. So I did E, I have two E's, I have a G sharp on top, so I need a B here to fill in the rest of the E major chord. Okay, yeah, so one of the things about doing this arrangement in the DAW specifically, like directly instead of in your notation software, is that you can't actually really look at the notes at the same time unless you really want to highlight everything and look on the left side, but you kind of have to use your ear a bit more when you're working directly in the DAW. And that's just my preferred workflow. Although I am classically trained, I think it's just a lot faster for me to play MIDI notes into the DAW. So anyway. Yeah, the violas here are a tad loud as well. I'm going to balance those a little lower. A couple dB down. Okay, let's have a listen. Little response there. I kind of like this. Let's hear that one more time. Okay, here, instead of that G sharp, you know what? Let's just go down to the E. Because now this spacing is a little better. B, E, G sharp, C sharp, right? Now we get that full 7th chord, so. Okay, let's see. So here, on this F sharp chord, do, 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 do. I want to keep that E actually. So I do want that dominant 7th sound. So I'm gonna go back up to an E here. Yeah, kind of like this. Let's see. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna add a little decoration here. Da, 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 da. I like kind of going above and then below my target note and then hitting my target note, so. Or you know what? Maybe not. Maybe I'll just keep it. I don't maybe necessarily need too much action here. Okay, and then, yeah, that's pretty good. This is just a standard B major chord, which then sets up the second half with my authentic cadence. Here we go. So let me hear the violins 2 here first. Yeah, so here I'm going to start from E, I think. I'm going to go up to F sharp. So basically staying in thirds. And then here I'll go down to the B. Oops. So basically in thirds, thirds here and then sixths as the chord gets bigger. Okay, that's fine. And then let's move on to the violas here. So I'm gonna go another 5th or 6th, I think, below the violins too. So let's give it a shot. I'm gonna start a little before. All right, let's have a listen. Yeah, so I kind of like this ascending motion here in the violas. And you notice here it kind of goes up a little bit more as the violins to hold a little longer. So this is that sort of independent motion that you kind of want to play around with when you're writing string parts, because you want each line to have its own kind of independent identity, which is where that sort of counterpoint comes in. If you just have everything static, you have every single note moving at the same time as the other chords, it doesn't feel quite as independent for those lines. And so the whole thing kind of feels like a block of sound moving together, but this is not really what we're going for, especially for a more emotional string passage. Yeah, so this B here is already being played by violins too, so here we're going to go to G sharp. Yeah, and then here I should have just held the A, that's fine. Cool. Let me see, I have C, I have A, so B, because right now this is going to be basically a B7 but altered, so I kind of need an E here, which maybe I'll do in the cellos, but maybe I'll do maybe I'll just go down a little bit. That's kind of nice. I like this kind of tritone jump here, that augmented fourth. So yeah, maybe I'll do a G sharp to lead it to it. Like that. Cool. I can always adjust this later, but you get the basic idea there. All right, so this is what our second half now looks like. Top three parts, and here's our double basses. So I'm going to need the cellos to fill in here. And because the bass is already taking care of that harmony, all I need to do is fill in the mid range and fill in the rest of the chord tones there to really make this full. So let's see. So let's do something a bit higher than the double basses here. Okay, let's hear this one more time. Let's try that G sharp instead. Ooh, that's nice actually. I like how the cello soars up there. So I'm gonna need these notes to come in a bit earlier. Let's try E here. This is nice too. Yeah, I kind of like the cello's playing the F sharp here because that outlines the actual sixth of the scale if it were in the key of A minor. Yeah, sorry, F sharp would be the natural sixth if we were in... If we're doing like A minor with a sharp six, basically, right? But because we're in the key of E major, I need that F sharp in there. So I'll keep that. And then... Okay, I'm gonna bring these in a bit earlier. Okay, let's see. What do we have here? So viola's actually coming down to that F sharp, right? Let's try the E instead. And then maybe do the D sharp, so leading tone. Yeah, and then this just was terrible. Yeah, I'll figure that out afterwards. I'll kind of confirm it, but that's kind of the idea there. So now if we take a look at this, here are the double bass parts here, just literally those two notes. But yeah, there's still kind of a big gap here in the cello. So maybe I can rearrange these notes just a little bit. Let's see. What happens if I brought it down to like a B here? That's kind of nice. Yeah, so this leap of a fifth doesn't sound super great. Going down a third is a little bit smoother, but yeah, that's the basic idea. So let's say that one more time. Yeah, that E here maybe isn't so good because it's kind of leaping up into that violin range a bit too much. So let's just do an A here for now. Yeah, maybe I'll do the G sharp here in the violas. Yeah, something like I like the way this G sharp sounds here. And then let's see, for the cellos, that's a little bit more balanced, as we can see. Yeah, so we have to double G sharp maybe, because that's not so nice. Let's see. Yeah, if I have the G sharp a little lower, that's a little better. Cool, something like that. Okay, let's have one more listen to this whole thing, and then what I'll do is I might add a few more instruments to it, and then I will have this basically finished. But the whole foundation of this is more in the string part itself. So melody, basses, and then filling in the inner notes of the other three sections. You can move your way up from bottom up or top down. It really doesn't matter. But yeah, it's up to your own workflow. So here it is. Little cello counter melody there. Right, and this little cello leap here is a little bit obvious, so I might even just turn down the modulation slightly there to smoothen it out. So let's see, there we go. I'm just gonna do, 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 and then make it go down even more. Just like that. Oops, so. Right, so obviously since we're paying attention to it right now, it's still pretty obvious, but in context, now it blends in a little bit better. All right, we are back the day later. I've gone through and made a couple changes, kind of simplified it a little bit, but also added a couple more elements to flesh out this arrangement. And full transparency, this is actually a demo for Dolce as well, so I wanted to make it as good as possible, of course, to my standard at least. And so, yeah, let me just run you through, and then I'll maybe solo up the strings so we can hear those individual voicings, and then add in the rest of the orchestra so we can hear all that in context again. But here's the full thing in its start to finish. Here we go. All right, so maybe we can just solo up the strings here and have a quick listen to those. You notice that yesterday I was, or earlier in the video, I was doing some more cross voicings or more like movement in some of the inner voices. And so I've decided to scale that back a little bit because listening to it today, it sounded a little bit cheesy. So I'm gonna take out the modulation here, but let's take a look at the voicings a little bit here. So from the top. So notice the violins are moving, the other voices are relatively still. And then the other voices respond as the violin holds. Now they kind of go together. Notice here that violin 1 and the cello kind of steps up at the same time, or the viola, sorry. The contrary motion, violin goes up, basses go down. Nice big crescendo with the swell. Love those dynamic layers. Cello moves up. Love that little portamento slide. And then they kind of sink in together. So really making use of the full contrary motion technique here. So here especially, this moment right here, going from the C up to that F sharp, that tritone has naturally a very tension-filled sound before we resolve down to the E. And you have the contrary motion here in the cellos going from F sharp down to D sharp, a minor third. So having, let's have a quick listen to that. If we just solo up the violins and the cellos, it sounds like this. Right, they kind of spread apart before they kind of come back in to settle on that E. So one more time. Right, and then we get multiple roots there. So yeah, that's the general idea. I just simplified the voicings down just a little bit, and I wanted them to have a bit more independence in terms of the motion itself, like the directions they were heading. And yeah, my general rule of thumb is when one line is playing like a longer note, especially if it's like a melody line and you want to fill in the gaps with something else, then rely on one of the inner voices to kind of have more of that motion. And then it will give the ear something to listen to at all times. It maintains our interest. And for me, that's generally a good way to go. Okay, so after that, I still felt the mid-range was lacking a little bit of body. So the first thing I did was I added a low chords patch from Cineorg, formerly Cineorg, now it's called Orchestral Chords from Cinesamples. And I'll actually show you the contact instance here. So the patch I brought in was the low chords patch. Let's have a quick listen to that. It starts in the second half. So I'm gonna go here. Just filling in the low end. Stepping down with the chord progression here. And then A minor, because that's like the minor 4 chord, right? That goes. And then the very, very last chord, we just warm everything up with a final E major chord there. Then next we had the bassoon from CSW. So here I wanted to have a little bit of interaction with the second half here, you can see. So all the lines are pretty much going up, but I also wanted to introduce a slightly different texture, but still warm enough that it feels cohesive and it kind of matches the consistency and tone for the rest of this ensemble. So if we have a quick listen to this, it sounds like this again. Yeah, so it's kind of ascending with the other lines as well, right? But again, you hear that texture very lightly, so it sounds like this. Yeah, and I'm just using legato there, and I'm also riding the mod wheel, so we're basically just using the first two dynamic layers, crossfading between them very naturally, and then riding it back down as the phrase ends. And so for me, that's a general rule of thumb. Whenever I have a melodic line that I want to make really smooth and really musical, 90% of the time, if you just follow the direction of the melody, it's going to result in a good result, because most of the time, these instruments are replicating the human voice, right? We naturally have a very raw instrument in our arsenal, being our voice. So when you imagine singers singing higher notes, they're usually more passionate, they require more power and support. And so we can replicate this with our orchestral instruments. So the higher we go, in most cases, the more you want to ride up the mod wheel to activate more of those dynamic layers and those intensity performances. And then as you kind of taper away, you bring the phrase down, you do the same with your mod wheel as well. So you kind of follow the direction of the melody. That's something I talk a lot about in my videos and in my virtual orchestration course as well. So anyway, that's the bassoon, and that's all it does for this piece. And then in the second half, that's when I bring in the flute. And so it sounds like this with the flute as well. Yeah, so if we solo that up, it'll sound like this. Here, I'm just kind of doubling the first two notes the same in the violin, and then go up to that E. So it's a third above the C in the first violins. Now here, we're just going up a little higher. And then settling on the third, the G sharp. So it adds that high sheen just above the violins one, kind of caps it off nicely. Here we have a little bit of percussion with the timpani, and by the way, that was CSW as well on the solo flute. I'm using the overhead mics because I want them to feel a little bit further back in the hall. I want the strings to kind of be in the spotlight, so I'll try not to push the other stuff too far front so that it will cover up the strings. And then we have the percussion, which is timpani, and I didn't want too much stuff here, just more decorative stuff, but I did want some of that low end in the tonal sense. So I have the timpani here, sounds like this. Swells into, and then we just descend with the basses. B, and then this rolled A crescendo, cuts off, and then the very last note when the E major chord hits, just one single hit there. And then only two glockenspiel hits as well, so B and C. And so just adds that little hint of magic. A little tinkle, right? And then I also accompany that with harp plucks as well. Just adds a little bit of motion there, and that is Cineharps from Cinesample. So turned it way down because Dolce is naturally really quiet, and I also chose the roomy setting here for the mic position, so room mics. Yeah, all the percussion is Cineperk, by the way. And then here, this is one of the last things I added, this 6 horns patch from Cinebrass Core, and I basically used the poly legato for the ending because I wanted to use multiple voices playing legato at the same time. And then here we just have this response when we're doing this crescendo. So dun dun dun, swell. And I'm using the articulations patch, which includes both legato and short notes. So I wanted to take advantage of that. Yeah, and then the ending sounds like this. And there we go. So the script will figure out how many notes you're playing, which notes are transitioning, and then activate the correct legato transitions for that voice. All right, and then the very last thing is tubular bells. One more bit of percussion, just that church bell sound. Right, so in context. And then the last tubular bell hit is just the A. So really bringing out that root and strengthening it just a little bit more. And that's the overall idea. So yeah, you can see the elements I brought in were not really there to overwhelm anything. Like I didn't want them to overtake the strings in any manner. This is really just to flesh out the rest of the arrangement, fill in some of the harmonic holes, make the overall arrangement feel a bit more balanced from top to bottom, you know, low frequencies, middle frequencies, high frequencies. And then in terms of the processing, I did I really only use two plugins. First, I added a hint of Mixcentric from Waves, so that just brightens up the mix very slightly. And then I also brought in Ozone 9's Elements. I kind of did the master assistant on the loudest section here in the middle with that crescendo, so it bumped up a little bit more of the low end, so it brings out that timpani, and the double bass is a bit more. Brings out the high end a little bit, so again it further brightens up the mix a tad, and then we lower some of the high mids as well. Imager, I just put it around 16.3. I wanted it slightly more stereo compared to more of a mono sound, so that's what I did there. And then the maximizer, it was set to about, -1. And that's it. So yeah, that is the arrangement. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions about it. This was a lot of fun to put together, and string arranging is just really enjoyable in general because they really are the foundation, the backbone of the orchestra. And so if you can get a piano sketch down that has, again, your melody, harmony, and rhythm, and then you can take those that sketch and then implement it into one part at a time in your strings, usually starting with the top or the bottom and then making your way inside, taking care to make sure all the lines are somewhat independent. If you want to go with this sort of mood for your passage, then you're going to get a result that's pretty linear, pretty horizontal and smooth and flowing, because you're approaching it from a track by track perspective over the course of the entire cue, rather than saying, look, I'm going to record maybe just 2 bars, record in all the parts, and then the next bar, record in all the parts, and so on and so forth. It's a kind of a different mindset. You're thinking the entire way through the entire phrase and then arranging one part at a time. And that's my personal preferred way of doing things, because to me, it feels the most musical. I can put myself into the minds of the performers and then try to feel like what they would be feeling if they were to perform this piece for me, Because at the end of the day, we are mimicking the real orchestra to the best of our abilities, and virtual instruments have developed to the point where they can replicate that for us very convincingly. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful. If you want to download a resource that dives into string arranging even further, gives you some solid practical advice for coming up with string passages that are full and lush and rich, then I want to give you that free guide down in the description box below. It's the first link there. You can grab it absolutely free as my gift to you for checking out this video today. And I hope it helps you with the string arrangements. It goes into stuff exactly like this, and again, talks about those practical approaches you can use for your string writing. So I really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.